Lucas had never imagined that a simple space mission would end up stranded on a planet so far from home. His ship, a small exploratory vessel, had suffered severe damage after encountering an unexpected storm of cosmic debris. He had lost all communication with the fleet, and his navigation systems were down. With no choice but to land on the nearest planet, Lucas brought the damaged ship down in a dense forest, hoping he could make some repairs. As he stepped out of his ship and took a deep breath of the alien air, a strange sensation crept over him. The planet was unlike Earth. The air was cooler than he expected, and the sky above shimmered with colors he had never seen before. He had been in deep space for so long that the idea of landing on solid ground felt almost surreal. Lucas didn't waste any time. He immediately began checking the damage to his ship. It was clear that it would take time to repair it, but with no other option, he set to work. Hours passed as he worked on the ship's engine, but no matter how much he tried, it seemed there was always one more problem to fix. He had just finished checking the exterior when a sudden noise made him freeze. It was faint at first, but unmistakable. There was something, or someone, moving in the woods nearby. Curiosity led him to take a few cautious steps toward the sound, the dense foliage parting as he moved through it. It was then that he saw her. She stood in a small clearing, a soft blue light illuminating her skin, which had a pale purplish hue, like the color of a twilight sky. Her long, silvery hair flowed down her back in gentle waves. Her ears were small, not like the large pointed ones Lucas had imagined when thinking of aliens, but small and delicate, much like a human's. She wore a simple dress made from a fabric Lucas could not identify, its color shifting between shades of teal and silver as she moved. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lucas was stunned, unsure whether she was real or just a figment of his imagination. The alien woman, however, stared at him with wide, uncertain eyes. She seemed just as surprised to see him. Lucas swallowed hard, taking a cautious step forward. I don't mean you any harm," he said, his voice breaking the silence. The woman blinked in response, her large eyes narrowing slightly. She didn't speak, but her gaze seemed to weigh him, as though she were sizing him up. There was something about her, something ancient in the way she carried herself, something that made her seem like she belonged to this planet. Yet there was also a hint of vulnerability in her eyes, a deep sadness that Lucas couldn't ignore. Unstranded, Lucas continued, holding up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "My ship crashed. I can't get back home unless I fix it. Can you help me?" Still, the woman remained silent, her expression unreadable. Lucas took another step closer, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He wasn't sure why, but he felt like he could trust her, even though he had just met her. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice a little softer now. The woman took a step back, her eyes flickering with something that could only be described as fear. She seemed to want to run, but instead, she stood frozen, her posture tense. Lucas paused, sensing her discomfort. "It's okay," he said quickly. "I won't hurt you." For a long moment, they stood there, the silence thick between them. Lucas tried to think of something, anything, to break the tension, but the woman finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am Lyra," she said, her words hesitant, almost as if she had not spoken to anyone in years. Lyra's voice was gentle but filled with a kind of sadness that Lucas couldn't quite place. It was as if she had given up on the idea of ever talking to someone again. Her words lingered in the air, like a secret that had been buried for too long. "I'm Lucas," he said, offering a tentative smile. "And I don't mean to intrude. I was hoping you could help me. I can't fix the ship on my own." Lyra looked down at the ground, her shoulders slumping as though the weight of her own loneliness was too much to bear. She turned away from him, her eyes scanning the forest as if searching for something or someone. Lucas, unsure of what to do next, stepped forward again, cautiously. "I'll leave you alone if you want," he said softly. "But I need help. I don't know how to get off this planet without it." For a long time, Lyra didn't answer, But then, slowly, she turned back to him, her eyes filled with something he hadn't expected to see. Uncertainty, yes, but also something else. It was as if she, too, was considering the possibility of something more. "Help," she repeated quietly, almost as if the word tasted strange in her mouth. "No one has ever asked me for help." The statement struck Lucas like a punch to the chest. He didn't know what it meant, whether it was because she was alone or because she didn't trust anyone, but it made him feel a pang of guilt for even asking. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," Lucas said. "I just thought, maybe we could help each other." Lyra's eyes softened, but she still didn't speak. Lucas gave her a few moments to process, but when she still didn't say anything, he sighed and turned back to his ship. "I'll be here if you change your mind," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that Lyra was somehow just as lost as he was, maybe in different ways, but still lost. It was a start, though, a quiet, uncertain start. But for Lucas, it was all he could hope for. Over the next few days, Lucas worked tirelessly to repair his ship. The damage was extensive, and the chances of leaving the planet seemed slimmer with each passing hour. Still, he refused to give up. He couldn't go back home without fixing the ship, and the idea of being stranded here forever was a thought he could not bear. Lyra, meanwhile, watched from a distance. At first, she remained hidden, only appearing when she thought Lucas wasn't looking. She observed him as he worked on his ship, his movements quick and efficient, his face focused and determined. But there was something else in his demeanor, something Lyra couldn't quite place. Lucas wasn't like the others. He wasn't afraid of her, nor did he seem to expect anything from her. He simply existed in her world, and for some reason, that was enough for her to watch him from afar. After a few days, Lucas decided to approach her again. He had gotten a few parts working, but the repairs were far from complete. As he sat down to take a break, wiping sweat from his brow, he noticed Lyra standing on the edge of the clearing, her presence barely visible in the shadows. "Hey," Lucas said, a small smile crossing his face. "You've been watching me work. I could use some help, you know." Lyra flinched slightly, startled by his sudden words. She didn't answer at first, simply staring at him with wide eyes. But after a few moments, she stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to help you," she said, her words careful and slow. "I've never helped anyone before." Lucas raised an eyebrow, surprised by her confession. "Why not?" She hesitated. There was a deep sadness in her eyes, something she tried to hide but couldn't. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, unsure how to explain. "Because no one has ever asked me for help," Lyra said softly. "I've always been alone." The weight of her words hit Lucas harder than he expected. He could feel the loneliness that seemed to suffocate her. The quiet ache in her voice made him realize just how isolated she must have been. He wasn't sure what to say, but he knew he couldn't leave her in that silence. "Maybe you didn't get asked before because people didn't see you the way I see you," Lucas said gently, his tone sincere. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Lyra." She didn't say anything for a long time. She simply stared at him, as though his words were too much to understand. Lucas wasn't sure if she would believe him, but the hope in his heart told him it was worth trying. "I don't understand," Lyra finally said, her voice full of confusion. "Why would you want to help me? Why would anyone?" Lucas thought about it for a moment, his eyes drifting to the broken ship behind him. It was hard to explain something so complex, something that had been building inside of him ever since he arrived. "I don't know," he admitted, "but it just feels right. I can't explain it any better than that. I think you've been waiting for someone to see you. And I see you. I see someone who's been hurt, someone who's been abandoned. But you're more than that, Lyra. You're someone I can help." Lyra's eyes softened as she listened. She didn't know what to make of it all, but there was a warmth in his words that she couldn't ignore. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a stranger in her own world. Lucas wasn't offering her pity or charity. He was offering her something far more precious, his companionship. She stepped closer, her voice shaking as she spoke again. "I've never had anyone like you in my life. I've never been chosen." Lucas looked at her, his heart aching for her. He had no idea what she meant, but he could sense the depth of her pain. She had never been chosen by anyone, not by her own kind, not by her family, not even by her world. It was clear now that her isolation wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. "You're not alone, Lyra," Lucas said softly, reaching out a hand. "You don't have to be chosen. You're already enough. And if you want, you can stay with me. You don't have to do anything you don't want to." She looked at his hand for a long moment, as though trying to understand what it meant. And then, with a shaky breath, she reached out and took his hand. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I've spent so long alone. I don't know how to trust anyone anymore." Lucas squeezed her hand gently, his eyes filled with compassion. "You don't have to do anything, Lyra. You don't have to trust me all at once. Just take it one step at a time." She nodded slowly, as if trying to come to terms with everything that had just been said. For years, she had lived in the shadows, hiding from the world that had abandoned her. But now, for the first time, someone had reached out to her, not out of pity, but out of genuine care. Lyra didn't know where this journey would take her, but she knew one thing. She didn't have to face it alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to believe that she could have something more than solitude. The days that followed were a mix of hard work and quiet moments. Lucas continued to focus on repairing the ship, while Lyra stayed by his side, uncertain of what to do but willing to help in small ways. At first, she simply watched, standing off to the side, her large eyes following his every movement. She wasn't used to being close to anyone, especially not someone who seemed so comfortable in his own skin. Lucas had a calm confidence that made her feel safer than she had ever felt before. One morning, Lucas asked her to help him with a task. He had just finished working on the ship's communication system, and now it was time to focus on the engine. There was a particularly tricky part that needed extra hands, and for the first time, he turned to her, extending a hand. "I could use some help with this," he said, his voice steady but hopeful. "I think you might be able to do it if you're willing to try." Lyra hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure if she could help or if she even wanted to. She had never been asked to assist anyone before. In her past, people had simply taken care of their own business without involving her. But Lucas made it feel different. For the first time in her life, she was being included. Taking a deep breath, she nodded slowly. "I'll try," she said, her voice still quiet but with a hint of determination. Lucas smiled warmly. "That's all I'm asking." They worked side by side, Lyra learning how to use the tools and parts Lucas had brought from the ship. It was difficult at first, and she fumbled with the unfamiliar equipment, but Lucas was patient. He showed her step by step how to work with the components, his hands guiding hers when needed. As they worked, a quiet bond began to form between them. The simple act of helping one another, of sharing a task, seemed to break down the walls Lyra had built around her heart. She started to open up more, not just about her past, but about herself. "I've never done anything like this before," she admitted, her voice soft. "I never thought I would be able to help anyone, especially not like this." Lucas glanced at her, his eyes full of understanding. "You're doing great, Lyra, and you're helping more than just with the ship. You're helping me too." Lyra paused, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always seen herself as an outsider, someone who didn't belong anywhere. But here, with Lucas, she was starting to feel like she was part of something. She wasn't just an alien on a distant planet. She was someone who could contribute, who could matter. As the day wore on, they made steady progress on the repairs. By evening, the ship was looking better than it had in days. Lucas was feeling hopeful, but there was still a long way to go. That night, after they had finished working, they sat by a small fire Lucas had made. The forest around them was quiet, and the sky above was a canvas of stars. For the first time in a long time, Lyra felt at peace. She wasn't used to this sense of calm. Back home, there had always been a storm inside her, a constant fear of being abandoned, of being rejected. But here, with Lucas, everything felt different. As they sat together, Lucas turned to her. "What's it like? Where you come from?" he asked, his curiosity genuine. Lyra thought for a moment before answering. "It's hard to explain. My people don't see things the way you do. They believe in strict rules, in traditions, and because I'm different, I was always left out." She paused, looking down at her hands. "I never really had a place to belong." Lucas listened quietly, taking in her words. He could see the sadness in her eyes, the weight of years of rejection. He didn't know how to fix it, but he knew that he could offer her something different, something better. "You have a place now," Lucas said softly. "You belong here with me. And not because you're different, but because you are who you are." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that before. It was as if, for the first time, someone saw her as more than just her past, more than just her loneliness. "I've never had anyone say that to me," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know how to believe it." "You don't have to believe it all at once," Lucas replied gently. "But I mean it. You're not alone anymore, Lyra. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in years, Lyra allowed herself to believe in something more. She didn't have all the answers, and she wasn't sure how things would work out. But for that moment, under the stars with Lucas beside her, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds being the crackling of the fire and the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. Lyra's thoughts wandered as she looked up at the stars. There was still so much uncertainty in her life, but for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew that she didn't have to face it alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days passed, and the work on the ship continued. Lucas and Lyra had built a quiet routine together. Lucas focused on repairing the ship's systems while Lyra helped as much as she could. Sometimes she would hand him tools or assist with tasks she had learned, though she was still unfamiliar with human technology. But there was something else growing between them, something beyond simple cooperation. In the evenings, after their work was done, they would sit around the fire and talk. Lyra would share stories of her world, of the people she had known, and of the traditions she had been raised with. Lucas would listen intently, sometimes asking questions, but mostly just letting her speak. He learned more about the strange and beautiful world she came from, a world that was harsh, with rules that governed everything, even the smallest actions. It became clear to Lucas that Lyra's people had little room for emotions like love and friendship. Everything had a purpose, a function, a reason. But for Lyra, these things were foreign. She had spent her entire life being taught that she was not worthy of love, not worthy of being chosen, and that idea had shaped who she was. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Lyra sat silently beside the fire, staring into the flames. Lucas noticed that something seemed different about her tonight. There was a distance in her eyes, a heaviness that wasn't there before. It was as if she was torn between something, between her past and the possibilities of her future. "Lyra," Lucas asked, his voice gentle, "what's on your mind?" She turned her head slowly to face him, her large eyes searching his face for any sign of judgment. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been kind to me, more kind than anyone has ever been. But I don't know if I can leave everything behind. I don't know if I can trust you completely." Lucas frowned slightly. He could feel the weight of her words. He had always known that trust would be something Lyra would struggle with. She had spent her life alone, learning to rely on herself, believing that no one would ever truly choose her. "You don't have to trust me all at once," Lucas said softly, his voice steady. "I'm not asking you to forget your past or to throw it all away. But if you want to, I'll be here. I'll help you. We don't have to leave right away. You can take your time." Lyra looked at him for a long time, her gaze steady, as if she were searching for something in his words. He could see the conflict in her eyes. On one hand, the life she had known, and on the other, the unknown future that Lucas was offering her. "I've never had a choice," Lyra said slowly, her voice trembling with the weight of her words. "I've always been told what to do, what to believe. I've never been allowed to choose for myself. But now with you, I feel like I can choose. I feel like I have the power to decide for the first time." Lucas felt his heart stir as he listened to her words. He had always believed that people deserved the freedom to choose their own path, to make their own decisions. But Lyra's words struck him deeply. For her, choice wasn't something she had ever been given. It was a concept that felt foreign, almost out of reach. "I don't want to rush you," Lucas said carefully, his eyes meeting hers. "But if you want, I'm here to help you find your own way. You don't have to choose me, but you can choose your future. I won't pressure you." Lyra remained silent for a moment, her thoughts racing. She was torn between the life she had known, one that had always left her feeling abandoned and unwanted, and the uncertain future with Lucas. But for the first time in her life, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she could have something more. Maybe she could have a choice. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I've never had this kind of choice before. I don't know if I'm ready to leave everything behind." Lucas reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't have to leave everything behind. You can keep the parts of yourself that matter to you, but you don't have to be alone anymore, Lyra." His words, simple as they were, seemed to reach something deep inside her. She looked at him for a long time, her heart torn between fear and hope. She had been taught that no one would ever choose her, that she was not worthy of love or companionship. But Lucas had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return. He had shown her that there was more to life than the loneliness she had known. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Lyra spoke, her voice steady but soft. "I don't know what the future holds, Lucas, but for the first time, I think I'm ready to choose something. Someone. I'm ready to choose this." Lucas smiled, a wave of relief washing over him. He knew that it wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time, he felt like they were on the right path. He wasn't asking her to forget her past, but to take a step into something new, something filled with possibility. "You don't have to choose everything right now," he said. "Just take it one step at a time. We're in this together." Lyra nodded slowly, a small but genuine smile forming on her face. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a choice, and for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. It was a small step, but it was a step toward a future that was hers to choose. The days had turned into weeks, and the ship was almost ready. Lucas had managed to repair most of the major systems, though there were still a few smaller things left to do. But for the first time since his crash, he felt like there was a chance of leaving this planet behind and returning home. Yet, he couldn't help but wonder about Lyra. Every day, they spent more time together, working on the ship, sharing stories, and slowly building a connection. But he knew that it wasn't just about getting the ship fixed anymore. It was about something deeper. Lyra had changed in ways Lucas hadn't expected. She was no longer the quiet, distant figure she had been when they first met. Slowly, she had begun to trust him, to open up to him in ways she never had before. But there was still something holding her back. She had shared her past with him, her fears, and the loneliness that had shaped her life. But she had not yet made a decision about what to do next. Lucas understood. She had been alone for so long, and the idea of leaving everything she had known was terrifying. He hadn't asked her to leave. He had simply offered her a choice. He had given her the space to decide, to make her own path. but he was beginning to wonder if she was ever going to take that step. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky painted itself in shades of orange and purple, Lyra approached Lucas while he was working on the ship. He was tightening a bolt on the engine when he heard her soft footsteps behind him. He turned to find her standing there, her eyes deep in thought. "Lucas," she began, her voice tentative, "can we talk?" He wiped his hands on a cloth and smiled at her. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Lyra hesitated for a moment, her gaze shifting to the ground before meeting his. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she said slowly, "about having a choice, and I think I've made mine." Lucas felt his heart race, unsure of where this conversation would lead. He had been patient with her, but he couldn't deny the small spark of hope that had ignited inside him. He knew that whatever decision she made, it would be important. He just wanted her to be happy, to be freed from the burden of loneliness that had haunted her for so long. "Lyra, you don't have to decide anything right now," Lucas said gently. "I just want you to know that I'm here, no matter what you choose. I'm not asking you to leave everything behind. I'm just asking you to be true to yourself." Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes focused on the ground as she gathered her thoughts. It was clear that she had been struggling with this decision, torn between the life she had known and the uncertainty of a new future. She had never had the freedom to choose before, and now that it was in her hands, it was both a gift and a burden. "I'd spent so long feeling like I didn't belong anywhere," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think anyone could ever want me. I thought that I was meant to be alone. But you've shown me that there's more. More than just surviving. More than just existing." Lucas stepped closer, his heart aching for her. He reached out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lyra, you're not alone anymore. I'm here with you, and I always will be. You don't have to carry all of this on your own." For a moment, Lyra closed her eyes, as though his words were washing over her, bringing her a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire burning beside them. It was the warmth of hope, of something new and unknown. "I know I'm not alone," she said, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "But I've been so afraid of making the wrong choice. I've been afraid that if I choose this, if I choose you, I might lose myself. I might lose everything I've known." Lucas smiled softly, his eyes filled with understanding. "Choosing doesn't mean losing who you are. It just means that you're opening yourself up to something new, a future where you can be yourself, without fear." Lyra's heart fluttered at his words. She had spent so long hiding from the world, hiding from the idea of being chosen, of being loved. But now, in this moment, she realized that she wasn't just afraid of the unknown. She was afraid of what might happen if she let herself believe in something more. With a deep breath, Lyra looked up at Lucas. "I'm ready," she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. "I'm ready to choose. I'm ready to stay with you." Lucas's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to make the decision that would free her from her past. And now she had made it. "You don't have to choose anything else right now," Lucas said, his voice filled with warmth. "You've already made the most important choice. You've chosen yourself, and that's all that matters." Lyra smiled, a small but genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice steady now. "But I know that whatever it is, I'm not facing it alone." And for the first time, Lyra believed it. She wasn't alone. She had chosen to stay, to build something new with Lucas. And that choice, that simple act of trusting herself, was the first step toward a future that was hers to create. The days continued to pass, and the bond between Lucas and Lyra grew stronger. With each passing day, they spent more time together, working on the ship and talking about their lives, their pasts, and their hopes for the future. Lyra had made her choice, and it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. But with every new step forward, there were still moments of doubt. moments where she questioned whether she was truly ready for the change that was coming. The ship was nearly ready for launch, and Lucas was excited. He could feel the pull of home, the need to return to Earth and share his story. He had never imagined that his journey would lead him to this distant planet, and yet here he was, ready to take off with an alien woman by his side. It was something straight out of a storybook, and yet it felt so real. Lyra, however, was still struggling with the idea of leaving her home behind. Despite her decision to stay with Lucas, the thought of leaving the only place she had ever known, the only life she had ever lived, felt daunting. She was no longer afraid of being alone, but the unknown was still a terrifying concept. She had never imagined her life could be so different. And now that she had chosen a new path, she wasn't sure what to expect. One afternoon, as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the forest, Lyra stood at the edge of the clearing, staring out at the horizon. Her mind was filled with thoughts of what lay ahead. She had never been far from this planet, and the idea of traveling to other worlds, of seeing new things, was both exciting and overwhelming. She felt the pull of adventure, but she also felt a deep sense of uncertainty. Lucas noticed her standing there, her silhouette outlined against the setting sun. He could sense that something was on her mind. Over the past few weeks, he had come to understand Lyra in a way that few ever would. He could read her expressions, the subtle shifts in her body language, and he knew when she was troubled. He approached her quietly, not wanting to startle her. "Hey, you okay?" he asked softly, his voice full of concern. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of emotions. She smiled at him, but it was a smile tinged with sadness. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice didn't quite match the words. "Just thinking." Lucas took a step closer, his gaze softening as he studied her. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. Lyra sighed, looking down at the ground. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've made a choice, but I don't know if I'm ready for what comes next. I'm not sure I'm ready to leave this place behind. I've never left before, and it's hard to imagine a life somewhere else. A life with you. I don't know what that will look like." Lucas stepped closer, his heart aching for her. He understood her hesitation. She had spent her entire life in this place, and even though she had chosen him, the unknown still loomed large in her mind. "It's okay to feel scared," he said softly. "I don't expect you to have all the answers. I'm here with you, and we'll take it one step at a time. We don't have to rush." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You're right. I've never had someone who would wait for me. I've always been on my own. I don't know how to trust that this is real." Lucas smiled gently, his hand resting on her shoulder. "It's real, Lyra. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not asking you to leave everything behind right now. I'm just asking you to trust that we can build something together. And we'll do it at your pace." Lyra nodded slowly, taking in his words. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future for her beyond the walls she had built around herself. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be moments of doubt along the way. But she wasn't alone anymore. Lucas was here, and together, they would face whatever came next. Over the next few days, Lyra continued to help Lucas with the final repairs on the ship. She still struggled with the idea of leaving, but each time she worked beside him, something inside her began to change. It was small at first, but she began to feel the pull of the unknown, the desire to see what lay beyond the stars. The fear that had once held her back began to fade, replaced by a sense of excitement and curiosity. And as they worked together, Lucas noticed the change in her too. The quiet moments of doubt were still there, but Lyra was beginning to embrace the possibility of something more. She was no longer afraid of the future, not in the same way she had been. She had chosen this path, and now it was time to see where it would lead. Finally, the day arrived when the ship was ready. It was a bittersweet moment for Lyra. She had never imagined she would leave her home behind, but she knew that it was time. She stood next to Lucas, her hand in his, looking at the ship that would take them both to a new future. "We're ready," Lucas said with a smile, his eyes full of hope. Lyra nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "Let's go." As they stepped into the ship and prepared for launch, Lyra felt a sense of peace wash over her. The unknown no longer seemed so frightening. She had made her choice, and now, with Lucas by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would build a new life, one step at a time. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Lyra couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement in her chest. This was it. She had made her choice, and now she was about to leave the only life she had ever known. The familiar landscape of the forest outside the ship's windows grew smaller with every passing second, but instead of feeling sadness, she felt a strange sense of freedom. Lucas sat beside her, his hand resting on the control panel. He smiled at her, his eyes filled with encouragement and warmth. "Ready for this?" he asked, his voice calm. Lyra took a deep breath, her hands gripping the armrests of her seat. She had never imagined her life could change so dramatically. But now, with Lucas by her side, the unknown no longer felt as terrifying. "I think so," she said softly, her voice steady despite the mix of emotions swirling inside her. The ship began to ascend into the sky, and Lyra watched as the planet she had once called home grew smaller and smaller beneath them. It was an overwhelming feeling, leaving everything behind, but she was no longer alone. Lucas was with her, and together, they would face whatever came next. The journey through space felt surreal. Lyra had never imagined that one day she would be traveling among the stars. She had only heard stories about other planets, other worlds, but now she was part of that story. She was living it. As the days passed, they traveled farther from the planet, their destination unknown. Lyra spent her time getting to know more about the ship's systems, learning from Lucas how everything worked. She was still amazed by the technology, but Lucas patiently showed her the ropes, helping her feel more comfortable with everything. At night, they would sit together, looking out at the endless expanse of stars. Lyra had never seen so many before, and she often found herself lost in the beauty of it all. It was peaceful in a way she had never known. There were no rules here, no expectations. She was free to be herself, to build a new life with Lucas. One evening, as they sat in the observation deck, Lyra turned to Lucas. "Do you ever wonder what's out there?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. "There are so many stars, so many worlds. What if there's something beyond what we know?" Lucas smiled, his eyes gleaming with the same sense of wonder. "I think about it all the time. There's so much we don't understand. So many places we've never been, so many people we've never met. It's a big universe, and there's so much to explore." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of excitement building within her. She had always felt like she was meant for something more, something bigger than the small world she had come from. Now, with Lucas, she had the chance to find out what that something was. As the ship traveled farther into space, they encountered other planets, some inhabited, some barren. With each new stop, Lyra's world expanded, and she began to understand just how small her previous life had been. She had spent so long trapped in fear and loneliness, but now she was part of something greater. She was learning about the vastness of the universe, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged. But there were still moments when the weight of her past threatened to pull her down. Late at night, when the ship was quiet and the stars outside seemed far away, Lyra would sometimes feel a twinge of doubt. She had left everything behind. Her home, her people, the life she had known. It was all so new, so unfamiliar. Lucas noticed these moments, and he was always there to reassure her. He would sit beside her, his presence calming, and remind her that she was not alone. "We're in this together," he would say, his voice steady. "Whatever happens, we face it side by side." One night, as they watched a new planet come into view, Lyra turned to him. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. "For everything. I don't think I could have done this without you." Lucas smiled, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "You don't have to thank me. You're strong, Lyra. You've already made the hardest choice, choosing to live for yourself, to trust again. I'm just here to help you along the way." Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had spent so long believing she was unworthy of kindness, of love, but Lucas had shown her otherwise. He had given her the strength to believe in herself again, to trust that there was a future for her beyond the pain of the past. As the ship moved toward its next destination, Lyra felt a sense of peace settle over her. She didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time, she was excited to find out. She wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. With Lucas by her side, she knew that together they could face anything. The stars outside twinkled like tiny diamonds in the vastness of space, each one a symbol of possibility, of dreams waiting to be realized. Lyra looked at them, a small smile playing on her lips. She had made her choice, and now she was ready for whatever came next. Together, they would explore the universe, discover new worlds, and create a life that was theirs to build. And no matter what happened, Lyra knew one thing for certain. She would never be alone again.